The thing that I've noticed with my game dev career so far, which is kind of counterintuitive and weird, is that the longer I do it, I'm clearly getting better at it. Like I feel more comfortable. I feel like a more professional developer, but my understanding of what works and my theories of what makes a successful game is becoming fuzzier and fuzzier.
This is a conversation with my dear game dev friend and former colleague Friedemann Allmenröder. We made Islanders at university together. After that, he developed some other fantastic games such as Pizza Possum in a different team configuration. He then solo developed Summer House, quite a hit, and he recently released a game called Slots Daggers. Also very, very successful release. It's a slot machine roguelike.
If someone asks me now how to make a successful game, I find it so difficult to answer, especially compared to we were so arrogant when we were like making the first Grizzly Games stuff. I felt like I had figured out, or at least like I knew some way of making good games. And I felt like I could have given more precise advice on how to make good games. Probably 5 to 10 years ago compared to now.
Because I know Friedemann so well, this conversation really allows us to dive deep and talk about some topics that might otherwise be maybe a bit more difficult to talk about. The foundation of my theory for how to make a successful game is actually to a large degree built on, I think, on your early beliefs. Because when I joined Grizzly Games, right, when I joined you and Paul, you had like this existing theory. There was a lot about appeal, actually. Like my initial ideas about appeal, I think, came from your early ideas about appeal. Do you still think about appeal in a similar way? Do you think like that's a deciding factor in what makes for a successful game, or has that also loosened up a bit?
No, definitely. Like this whole appeal thing, I think a lot of the things that we talked about with Grizzly Games about appeal and player fantasies and all of the things that you still mention regularly, I think about all of them. Just my approach to how to create them has become, I think, maybe more intuition based. I still think a lot about appeal and like what appeal is. Like how do you get, because I guess the formula of yours that I like the most is the success of a game is basically appeal times retention. I think you said that at some point. Like how good are you at drawing people in? And then once they're in, how good are you at keeping them, giving them a good experience, making them enjoy their time, maybe write a positive review, stuff like that. I think that's quite a succinct way of putting it. Like you need to create interest and then you need to deliver on that intrigue that you created in the first place. But that's, the longer I'm looking at that formula, the more I'm like, oh, Jesus, that's a lot of moving parts that you can factor into that, right?
So it's like a little bit like the advice of saying, just make a good game, but then when you look closer, it's like, what the frick does that even actually mean?
What is a good game? Exactly. Exactly. It feels a little bit like we're telling people, make a good game that looks good at first sight. And then I'm like, yeah, right. Well,
okay, thank you.
Thanks. What's that supposed to do for me? So, yeah, I guess maybe what is happening is the longer you make games, the more ways you find of approaching this. You know, like intrigue. I think when we started making stuff with Islanders at university, not with Islanders, with Grizzly Games at university, my appeal model of how to make a game that people want to play was largely based on visuals. I just thought, okay, just make it look really, really visually appealing. Give it like that minimalist aesthetic that was really trendy at the time also, I think, you know, like low poly with saturated nice colors. And then the longer you make games and the longer you play games of other people and the longer you're part of the game dev community, you realize, wow, there are so many people who are so infinitely creative at creating appeal in different ways. It doesn't have to be the visuals. It can be the fantasy. It can be the mechanic. It can be a setting that's really, really cool. There's like so many ways. And the longer I look at all of those, the less I feel like I can confidently say, okay, here's how you do it. Here's how I approach it. It just becomes a bigger and bigger collection of potential approaches.
Yeah, it's a similar, like, especially since I started making this podcast and started talking to more developers, I'm like becoming a bit more humble as well, because it's like you see so many different approaches and all the different approaches that are working. That's like, what can you even say to someone who's like, I want to start making games? Sure. But like, if somebody came to you and asked you, I want to make a successful game, what would you tell them nowadays?
Yeah. So what I would tell, I think the first thing that I still believe is really, really true is make something small. Like pick a project that feels almost too small in the beginning, something where you feel like it's so ridiculously underscoped. You should have this feeling of, oh, this is going to be easy, because it's not going to be easy. You know, when you're sitting at home and you're thinking about your new game idea under the shower, you've got this amazing idea for a slot machine game and you think, oh, this is going to be so easy. I'm going to be able to make this in 6 weeks. That's the feeling you should be looking for, especially in the beginning, because you're not going to be able to do it in 6 weeks. It's going to take way longer. So I think that's the first one. Find something simple, find something that feels almost underscoped. And then I guess, think really hard about how do you create appeal? How are you going to draw people in when they look at this game for the first time? That's something that I still just spend ages thinking about before I settle on a game. And I think lately my personal reply to it has become more intuition and taste based. But I think if someone is just starting out with making games, it might be good to just gather references, look at other stuff, like look at a lot of games, see what speaks to you, what do you connect with, and then see how you can put a twist on it. Because I feel like that's the point, isn't it? Like when I'm scrolling Steam or when I'm on Twitter and I'm looking at other game devs' feeds and stuff like that, the thing that makes me connect with things is always when it has this tiny little edge where you're like, this is a fresh take on whatever, on this visual style, on this kind of gameplay formula, on this type of setting. So whatever it is that gives you that edge, really, really look for that. I think that's important. That's the thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about when I'm in this phase of like, okay, a project is done. I'm thinking about what's the new project. I think, how can I make something that's going to stand out enough to intrigue people, but be familiar enough to not alienate them.
Right. So this familiarity scale of being familiar, but not too familiar.
Yeah. I think, like recently listened to your episode with Philomena on Dungeon Crawler. And she said something that really connected with me about how Slots and Daggers went. Because she basically said, deck builder, roguelikes, everyone knows what that is now. But no one had made one before that was with this claw machine. What are they called? Claw?
They're called claw machines, yeah.
Claw machine,
Dungeon Crawler was the game, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And that's when I started making Slots and Daggers, that's what I felt like. I was like, okay, I want to make a fantasy deck builder roguelike thing, but combine it with a slot machine, because there were slot machine games out there, there were fantasy deck building games out there, but I felt like in this specific combination, I hadn't seen it done in a way that felt, satisfying to me.
But there's clearly a difference between like pointless innovation and like useful, meaningful innovation, right? So for example, I could also take the roguelike formula and make a completely pointless innovation to it and be like, the hook or the twist I put on it is your toilet man and you have laser eyes. I don't know. This is already good again, because so bad that it's good again. But
I guess. Maybe this is how we find out that there isn't pointless innovation. You just
I don't believe that. Let me give a different example.
That.
For example, I was doing some consulting for a team that made a Survivors-like game, like a Vampire Survivors-like game. And the twist they put on the game was that they had a very complicated progression system that really like has a lot of complexity in allowing you to customize your attacks. And the question I was wondering about there is that the type of innovation that this genre asks for, right? Because the genre is very fundamentally about simplicity.
Yeah.
So does it make sense to innovate in a way that makes it more complex? You could argue, sure, maybe. But I feel like there are some directions where it doesn't make as much sense as others.
Yeah,
right?
That's 100% true. I agree with that. I think maybe a good way of approaching it is like look for things that work, look for things that have been proven independently, and then combine them. Like in the slot machine example with Slots and Daggers, I feel like slot machines have been proven to work quite well. like they're really addictive in quite a
Yes.
toxic way. But I feel like even if if you take the real money and you take the toxic addicting mechanics out of it, it's still fun to press around on a slot machine. That most people find that satisfying. And a fantasy deck builder, that's been proven to work. So I think that might be a good approach, to look for things that have independently worked well. And when you think about them, they match somehow.
They need to match,
once someone says to you a fantasy deck builder slot machine game, you're like, oh yeah, that might make sense. That might be a cool idea. And then combine those. I guess the thing, I guess you just can't take common sense out of it, can you? There isn't a formula where you can, why is the Toilet King with the laser eyes bad? I don't know if we can calculate that. But if you're a good creative, you should be able to tell the difference, right?
Yeah,
I think that's sort of the satisfying, to me, that's part of the satisfying work of creativity also, that it isn't 100% formulaic. Every time I try to fully drill down and find a perfect, mathable, quantifiable formula, I feel like I'm sort of running into a dead end.
Sure,
know what I mean?
You can always be like, but in this case, it's not true. And then it's like you have to water down. You have to keep watering down your rules till they become a bit meaningless almost.
I think this is actually getting exactly to the point of why I find it harder and harder to give advice, because I feel like either you make very specific rules and then you're just explaining this one very narrow phenomenon that you're seeing. You can, I think after something has succeeded, you can go and make a very specific explanation of why it has succeeded. But then it becomes kind of difficult to apply it to other things, because you've just, in this very specific case, explained, okay, why, for example, Slots and Daggers or Islanders, why were these games successful? But that might not apply to the next slot machine game or the next city builder or the next whatever thing. So you either make these very specific things, or I find myself making these broad theories, which then often become so broad that I'm like, what am I actually even explaining here? Like, I'm ending up saying, make a good game that works. And I feel like in between those two extremes, I'm finding it harder and harder to find really solid advice. And more I'm thinking you need to think about this stuff and look at it and test it and figure it out and trust your intuition, build your intuition, develop your intuition. Sometimes when we talk about creative theory, we forget that creative work is not completely formulaic.
So it's almost maybe it is formulaic, but the formulas and rules behind it are so complicated that you cannot formulate them simply in language or something. You basically you have to train your brain to understand the complex rules. And that is what you call intuition or taste or something like that.
Yeah, I actually think that puts it really well. I sometimes feel like if you follow all these rules perfectly, there are too many. It's too complicated. The system is too chaotic to do it on a rules-based level that you can explain on a podcast. We can definitely say helpful stuff here to people. We can give advice that's really helpful, I think, talking about appeal, talking about things that have worked for us and stuff, and they will help hopefully shape someone's mental model. But I think this mental model has to always have quite a lot of space for intuition, for gut feeling, for lived experience, for that sort of stuff. I find myself valuing that higher and higher the longer I make games.
Right. But when we say gut feeling and intuition, then I think some people might overshoot and interpret this as, it's completely luck or something like that. Do you think that game dev is to a large degree luck?
No, I think you can. If you have a good process, I think you can eliminate a lot of luck. Definitely, I think there's a lot of luck and privilege in how you get into a position where you even get to develop games and stuff. But if we put that aside, if you are able to make games, I think there's good processes that you can build to verify if your ideas work beforehand, and then you can just generate enough ideas until you end up with one that's successful. But how to generate that idea and picking which of the 20 ideas you have under the shower is the correct one, I think there is still something sort of like fuzzy. There's something hard to grasp in there, to me
Yeah.
at least.
And what would you say, what are good ways to develop this intuition and taste so that my brain does spit out the correct ideas under the shower?
Yeah, that's the difficult question, isn't it? How do you do that? I think a lot of it has to do with consuming stuff, with looking at things, like being interested in games, being interested in art, being interested in culture, popular culture, whatever fascinates you. I think if you spend a lot of time exposing yourself to things that speak to you, you refine your taste and your intuition and your ability to make those. Like, I read this really interesting, it was, I think it was the prelude to a book by Kojima, the legendary game designer. And he said, I think the book was a compilation of other books that he's read and recommends to people. And the intro to the book was him saying that I think every day, or like at least multiple times a week, he goes after work into a bookstore and he looks at the books and he tries to pick out different books, takes them home and reads them. And he sees this as an exercise in refining his intuition in picking a good book. So he, like, based on the limited information that he gets from the book, like the cover design, the title of the book, the little blurb on the back, reading it, he tries to make a gut decision on, is this going to be like a hit book for me personally? Is this going to really speak to me? Or is it, when I actually read it, is it going to be not as good as I hoped? And then he describes this as sort of the craft of refining his intuition. And he says that for his day-to-day, where he has to make, because he's directing a large team, he has to make like hundreds of these gut-based direction decisions. This is the kind of work that helps him get better at that. And for him, it's a bookstore, but I feel like that can be anything. That can be music, like digging through, I don't know, record shops or Spotify playlists. It can be going to the cinema and like really connecting with films. It can be looking at photography exhibitions, whatever. But I think that's an important work for if you want to do successful creative work. I think it's important to refine this intuition.
So it surprisingly sounds very similar to how people talk about AI, right? It's kind of like you need good training data. Garbage in means garbage out, right? If you want to train your own neural net to detect like good game ideas and develop good taste, then you need good training data. Like if you, I mean, maybe that's a weird analogy. I'm not sure.
No, I actually think it feels edgy somehow because of how opposed AI sometimes feels at the moment to creatives being able to make a living. But it's a good analogy. Like the training data that you put in when you're sitting there at your computer and you're making your game, the only thing that can come out is the sum of all of the things that you've put in and all the combinations between those. So yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, like improving your training data.
Do you see creativity as like a remixing process, or do you see creativity as a creation process?
Remixing, 100%.
Okay.
I don't know if this is like scientifically true whatsoever, but my mental model of how creativity works is there's a million things in your brain and you can bash them together. And sometimes if what feels like something truly creative, like a groundbreakingly new thing, is like a really fortunate combination of two old things that make something seem very new. Or sometimes it's a combination of like 5 old things that make something new. But I deeply believe in this model of you can only combine things in your mind. You're not actually coming up with new stuff.
Right. You can only combine a slot machine and a roguelike if you know what both of those things are. Otherwise, you can't have that idea.
Yeah. And then there's like these really creative people out there who don't think, deck building, roguelike, slot machine. They think, I don't know, how is concrete made? But how is concrete made in Japan for brutalist Japanese architecture? And then how does that interfere with the manufacturing of speaker system? And then they come up with these like wild, and how does Mario Kart factor into that? And then you get these like truly creative, insane seeming ideas. But I think there's still combinations of stuff that just very out there combinations.
Right. So like building taste is maybe could also be seen as like building your library of things that you can combine with other things, maybe almost, right?
Yeah. And also, I think, like for me personally, I find it more and more important to be able to make a judgment call on something. I like being able, when you look at a painting, for example, or when you look at a screenshot of a prototype that you're working on, being able to decide whether you like it, and then also being able to say why you like it and analyze, like, what's the thing that draws me to this? Because I feel like if you fill yourself with tons and tons of references, but you don't have a good idea of, am I actually drawn to these? And why am I drawn to these? It can be a bit overwhelming. Whereas if you collect a lot of things that you deeply connect to, like a specific type of music and a specific type of visual, then you can go back in and combine those. And it, I think, has a high chance of creating something unified, that because you like all of these things and the combination of them appeals to you, there's a high chance that other people who have a similar taste or have had similar experiences to you might also be drawn to that. What's your model, actually? I'm interested. Do you think creativity is creation or combination?
No, I also think it's remixing. I agree to your take. I think you put it quite well. Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of, this is very much the nerdy interpretation of this, right? But what you're saying is almost a little bit like the difference between feeding your brain labeled versus unlabeled data. So you want to, like, when consuming stuff, you want to immediately label it as, do I like this, do I not like it, and why? So that your brain can better make sense of it and better combine it with other things almost.
Putting little tags on the images in your reference gallery.
You want to tag all of the incoming information so that it's more easily accessible.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I was almost worried you were going to go in the direction. You want to be able to judge stuff immediately, and you should be able to judge people at first glance.
Yeah. You need to be able to judge a book by its cover, famously. That's
yeah, it's very good for a sec.
No, I think just being able to make judgment calls and to make them also in like a slightly analytical way, I think that's an important skill. I think sometimes this sort of stuff doesn't get talked about enough in games because we spend so much time rightfully talking about like the technical aspects of game development. And then we have developed like a huge language of talking about how to do marketing for games and how to sell games. There's so much content about these two facets of it, tech and like marketing, sales type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I wish we had more discourse or more content about how does the actual creative work happen? How does, like, besides making something and validating whether it's commercially valid, how do you make something in the first place? How do you make the thing that you then validate?
Well, I'm not sure how you feel, but I very much feel like the conversation has started shifting a little bit because I feel like more developers are realizing, I'm not sure, maybe I'm also part of of that shift, or maybe it's just my bubble, I'm not entirely sure. But people, I feel like, are starting to notice that ideas are becoming more important. Maybe that's because execution is becoming easier and easier. So now we're once again shifting to, okay, the ideas actually do very much matter. So I think that conversation definitely has started a lot more. Yeah.
That's actually really true. Yeah, that's a good point about why this is happening. Like there used to always be the saying, like, everyone has a million ideas for games. It's all about the execution. And I remember us at university talking about that quite a lot, that it's so much more about execution than it is about the idea.
Yeah.
And like you say, like, I guess also because we are at a later point in our career now where we don't struggle with the execution as much anymore, it comes around and it becomes so much more about the idea again. Like, if I execute this idea well, is it going to really connect with people? Is it going to be something really satisfying? Or is it just going to be, I don't know, a slightly lame idea, but very well executed?
Maybe this is the correct point to like dive into the both idea and execution of Slots and Daggers, because
speaking of a poor idea,
I think both idea and execution are quite impressive. So we can talk about both of them individually. So Slots and Daggers is a slot machine roguelike Was that like a shower idea, or where did it come from?
It was actually a bit of a shower idea. Like the initial point was I saw this GIF. Some other indie developer, I can't remember who it is. I wish I could because I want to attribute it to them, but I just can't. It was, the GIF with Anakin and Padme where they're talking to each other, and I think he says to her, the next hit indie game has released on Steam, and she asks him, "It's not just gambling with extra steps, is it?" And then he looks gloomy, and then she says, "Is it?" So, and for some reason that I saw that like ages ago, that was like right after Balatro took off. And somehow it stuck with me because I think the GIF is meant to like poke fun at that. And it's seeing this trend in sort of a negative way. But I remember seeing the meme and thinking that's not a negative thing at all. I think it's quite cool that you can take these gambling things, remove the toxic aspect of it's about real money, and it like draws people in to like an unhealthy degree, and turn them into these really interesting, engaging games. So that's when I started thinking about, okay, what if you get more explicit about that? Well, because some of the games that were coming out at the time, for example, Vampire Survivors, to me feels a lot like a slot machine.
Oh yeah.
Like the way the game works feels like a slot machine that's sort of hidden, like not in a shameful way. There's nothing shameful about that. It's like very elegantly wrapped in this like monster fighting thing. And I started thinking about, wouldn't it be cool to make a game where you don't hide it, where you just say it's an actual slot machine?
Mm-hmm.
Just be upfront about the fact that you're making a casino type game.
Yeah.
So I'd been carrying that idea around with me for a while. And then I can't remember what the trigger was. Maybe I can't remember what the timing was. Maybe I had seen the Clover Pit trailer, the announcement trailer, and I was like, oh my God, that's genius. Someone is doing it. Someone's making the slot machine game. Maybe it was them that inspired me to actually go and build a prototype of something that combines a fantasy game, like a fantasy fighter, with the slot machine thing.
Why do we see so many gambling games? Like the meme it's very funny, but the reason why it's funny is because it's also so true. A lot of the hit indie games are gambling with extra steps nowadays.
They really are. It's like I've seen the term stats like recently, where essentially you're just playing a huge Google sheet or like an Excel sheet, and you're slowly optimizing different numbers in it. I don't know. I guess they're just well-established game loops. They're also aesthetically really pleasing. They have this appeal of it's sort of forbidden. I guess I at least think it's a really cool fantasy to play roulette loads. But obviously I don't, because I don't go to the casino that much. And it's been like pop culture has also really helped, hasn't it? Like James Bond playing, what was it called? Casino Royale, stuff like that. It's quite a cool thing. So I guess it offers a lot of fertile ground for what we were talking about earlier. Take one thing that's worked really well, which, for example, is a roulette, and combine it with something else that's worked really well, but it hasn't been combined yet. And I guess once Balatro had happened, it had been sort of validated that, okay, this is actually good to combine these two things. People really, really want to play something that has the aesthetic of these casino type games, but it has the progression and the satisfaction and the mechanical loops of a roguelike.
I think it's very interesting, just the nature of randomness, the fact that it's so addicting. Like I remember, like we all made like prototypes that have some randomness, like some procedural generation. Like even in that, it's like so addicting to just click through the worlds and see like which worlds the generator spits out or something like that.
Yeah, like that's true.
Randomness makes everything like a billion times more replayable for some reason.
Yeah, it does. There's like a psychological effect there, isn't there? I feel like maybe I even learned that from one of your YouTube videos about how to make the button fun. That there's like there's this thing that they found out where if you just give reliable rewards, it's way less fun than if you give slightly randomized rewards. If you click a button and you get like a coin, but every now and then you get 10 coins or like 100 coins, but it's unpredictable. Then your brain goes like, oh, the 100 coins might be just around the corner. Maybe if I click once more, I get 100 coins.
Right.
So,
you get a type of FOMO that you would not have otherwise. Yeah.
yeah, maybe
Like-
subconsciously that's what's happening.
Like also like for procedural level generators, you get like this FOMO of if I don't click the button again, I might miss out on seeing a really cool level or something like that.
Yeah. FOMO, or just like curiosity. You're just like, what if I play one more? What if I go and...
What if I get this insane run in Slots and Daggers and get like 1 billion coins from the dice or whatever?
yeah, exactly. And I also think it's a fact that it takes away a little bit of the skill component is quite nice for people who are not as into games. Like myself, for example, I'm more of a casual roguelike gamer, which I think you can also really feel in Slots and Daggers. It's not like you can't play Slots and Daggers for 80 hours. And some of the like combinations of symbols that you can buy are super overpowered, just because I'm not the type of player who... I haven't played Balatro for 100 hours. I've played it for like 5 hours and I had a great time with it, really loved it. But then I move on to the next thing. And I think like luck-based mechanics and randomness sort of helps people who are not like optimizing for skill still have a really good experience.
That is so true. You can also see that in board games a lot. For example, if like people don't want to play chess with me or something because I'm
100%.
not that I'm like a gigabrain at chess or whatever, but like the people in my immediate surroundings just averse to chess, so they don't enjoy playing it with me. But like if we play more luck-based games, like if it's like these typical Bavarian card games that are a lot more luck-based, then that makes it much easier to play across different skill levels and also my skill
level.
level.
It sort of levels the playing field, doesn't it?
A lot. Yeah. It makes it much more approachable.
Yeah.
True. Also true. Interesting point. Right. So you had this idea, and did you know immediately there was like a good idea? Were you unsure about it, or just like, let's prototype it?
So the situation at the time was that I was working on like a different game that I was mid-production with. So, and I'd been working on that for, I think, 6 or 8 months already. So that was quite deep into production.
Farming
and I have
game.
The farming game.
Secret farming
game.
Yeah.
And I have a prior for abandoning projects, as you know, from my past. Like I need to always be careful with my impulse to when I feel like, oh, maybe I should make this other thing. Like shiny object syndrome, I think you call it, where you see the other thing that seems easier or more logical. I've in the past made the mistake of jumping between projects too much. So I'm always quite like careful when it comes to that. But I just had this, I was sort of stuck on the farm game and I had this other idea. And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to do it on work time. I actually on the weekend took like 2 days, took a Saturday and a Sunday where I had no plans. And I made a mini prototype for the slot machine game, which then became Slots and Daggers. And then it was more to, I thought, if I make the prototype, usually if you make a game prototype, it's kind of curing because you realize, oh, this is actually way harder than I thought it was going to be. And it's not as instantly fun as I think it is. So I did it more as a way to get away from this nagging feeling of what if I made the slot machine game? What if I don't make the farm game? But then at the end of the weekend, after literally 2 days of work, I was like, oh, Jesus, this is so much fun. This is really, really fun to play already. Arguably more fun than the farm game is in the current state.
Shit.
And so because I don't trust myself on this, because it's also easy to like fool yourself into this sort of stuff, isn't it? I then sent it to my publisher, Future Friends, who I've built like a really close creative collaboration with over the years. Like we published Summer House together and they really helped me on that. Like they just did a really great job on Summer House overall. And then on the farm game, we were collaborating quite closely. Like I was showing them in progress stuff. They were giving feedback on the game design and stuff like that. So it's quite like a close collaboration. So when I had this prototype of the slot machine thing, I thought it's good if I give it to them because they actually have money to lose. They won't, if you show your friends don't really have anything to lose. They can just be like, yeah, the slot machine thing seems fun, cool. Future friends, however, they have an invested stake in the farm game. So if they say, ooh, the slot machine game actually seems like it has a lot of potential, I know they're not just bullshitting me to be nice to me. So I send it to them. I think I posted the message the other day on Twitter. It was like a super informal, because we already had a group chat and stuff. So I sent a really informal email, not even an email, Discord message, I think, with a little video of the prototype saying, hey, I've got this thing that I've made over the weekend and I'm surprised by how fun it is. What do you think? Should we, in order to give myself some time to get away from the farm game, maybe work through the creative block a little bit? Should we take 6 weeks to make this slot machine game? Just put it out as a super minimum viable product and see how it does on Steam. And they were like, sick. Yeah, we love the slot machine game. I think they were in the process or had signed Clover Pit. So they were like, ooh, we love slot machine games. Let's have a second one.
Nice.
And yeah, I think that's how it started. The initial idea was, okay, 6-week project, super, super minimalist. Just make it satisfying, give it a tiny closed game loop and just put it out, see how it does.
And did that plan end up working out? Because I think you spent a little more time than 6 weeks, right?
It ended up becoming 7 months, so that didn't work out. But it was, I guess the game was sort of you could say like a victim of its own success. Like every time we did the first 6 weeks, I made it, I showed them the final thing. I could have gotten it, I think, to a publishable state in another week. And they looked at it and were like, this is great. We really, really like this. Why don't you spend 6 more weeks on it to just make it a bit more viable? Because it was very bare bones. It would have had, I think, like, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour of playtime.
Yeah.
And after those 6 weeks, we felt like, okay, everything in here is really cheap. Like the monsters are fast to draw. It's like a pixel art style. It's very stylized. It's very sketchy, a lot of it. So we were like, okay, let's spend another 6 weeks, see how it looks after that. So that was 3 months already. And then after those 6 weeks, we were like, oh, this is actually getting really, really fun. Should we spend another 6 weeks and see how And then it just cascaded into 7 months. Because
so don't stop investing while you're still seeing good returns on your time investments, right?
I think that's the lesson. I think that's exactly what happened. We felt like, okay, the curve is still pretty steep. If we spend another 6 weeks on this, we get so much out of it in terms of playtime and in terms of synergies between different weapons or enemy abilities and stuff like that. So it always felt like we're not yet at the point where you're having diminishing returns, where you're spending loads of time working on stuff that actually doesn't do as much for the game. And I think once we got to that, we pretty quickly decided, okay, this is it. We still want this to be a small project. Let's put it out.
So in terms of idea, I guess if you reflect back to where we started a bit, you had like made a combination of ideas, and you were like, your taste and your gut feeling told you this could be a good combination. And then on top of that, you had like a solid validation process, and you're like not purely just trusting your gut feeling, but you have like an actual game plan for validating with someone who's like stakes in it. That's how the idea side of it came to be in summary,
I guess. For example, I think Slots and Daggers is a good example of this like creative combination process, because it draws pretty direct inspiration from a lot of things, but those things are not super obvious when you see the final game. Like, for example, there's just a book by Jeffrey Allen Love. It's called Tales from the Shadowed City. It's like an experimental graphic novel, I'd call it. And it's got these really, really cool, evocative enemy designs in it. They're not enemy designs in the context of that graphic novel, but I've always been super fascinated by this world that it implies, because there's like knights and demons and all sorts of creatures, but there's also coffee and they're smoking cigarettes and stuff. And I was always like, something's cool about the idea of there being a knight in armor, but he's going to a French cafe in the morning and smoking his cigarette. Something about that world that implies really fascinates me. So that's where out of this little graphic novel, that's where the whole world of Slots and Daggers comes from. It's this idea, okay, what if there's a world where knights in armor smoke cigarettes? And then at the time, I was really obsessed with how like drum machines sound from like 90s crunchy hip hop stuff, like Dr. Dre and all of these like old beat making things. So I just took that for the soundtrack. I was like, okay, cool. it sort of fits in a weird way to have these sleazy, you're in the corner of a pub, you're playing your slot machine, to have like these hip hop inspired things. And I'd seen the Bob Dylan film where they're writing one of his songs, I think like a Rolling Stone. And there's this cool scene where one of the guys, they're like in the studio, they're already recording, but the song isn't fully what it is yet. And this one guy can't really play anything else, I think. So he plays the organ and he just presses like a chord that starts at the beginning of the song. And it gives this whole song its identity. It's such a unique, like now when you listen to the finished song, it's driven by this organ sound. So it was this weird gut decision to put the organ in. So I came home from watching that movie and I was like, hey, the organ sounded great for Bob Dylan. Why don't I see what a jazz organ sounds like combined with these hip hop beats? And that's what the soundtrack of Slots and Daggers is.
So this
it's
is
hip
like
hop beats combined with a drawbar organ that's in like every song. So I think this is a good example for just, if you have these things that all really speak to you, all of these things really resonated with me. And then combining them, I feel like you can come up with something that has quite a lot of character. I think Slots and Daggers, people, when they see it, they always know it's Slots and Daggers. It's quite a clear aesthetic.
So all of these ideas and things you have in your mental library are still useful during execution. Also, like for the smaller decisions, like which instruments to use and so on.
Yeah.
Or is that the so-called execution is what matters aspect that we used to talk about, where it's like all of these...
Maybe it also is.
Because I guess the idea of execution is what really matters, is that the idea that you have this very long series of small decisions that make the final product, right? And how you make all of these small decisions obviously shapes the product to a large degree.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I also think this whole thing of like the ideas matter more compared to the execution has something to do with you just get better at executing. But I just don't worry about, because I've made enough games now, I don't worry about the execution as much anymore. Like I know I can get a coherent art style together somehow.
Right. So
I think that's why. So the execution is still super important. It's just it's not my prime concern anymore, or it's not as high in my priority as it used to be.
But what is execution exactly? I guess before we get into it, what is execution? Is it like the series of small decisions? So if you're saying you don't worry about execution as much anymore, is that like technical skill, or does it mean you don't worry as much anymore about making the correct call in like these micro decisions, or what is it exactly?
Yeah, good question. What is execution? I guess execution is like making all of these little decisions of what it actually is from a concept, where I feel like in the idea stage, that's why ideas are so great, because you haven't narrowed anything down yet. You haven't excluded any of the possibilities. Like the idea, it's a fantasy slot machine game, has so many potential incarnations of what the final game could be. And you haven't decided against any of them yet. So it's amazing. And I guess execution is chopping away all of these different branches that could be into the one final thing that it ends up being. Like, does it have a classical soundtrack? Does it have an 8-bit soundtrack? No, it has the hip hop drum machine soundtrack with the drawbar organ. Is it 3D? Is it pixel art? Is it illustrate? I think that's execution to me. Making all these decisions. And that also applies on a code basis. Do you have a really sophisticated code basis, or do you write disgusting spaghetti code like me? You have to decide against a bunch of different things. And then, you end up with the final thing. That seems like a good... What's your mental model for what is execution?
I don't really know. Like, it's probably a mixture of technical skills, like for example, like programming skills, drawing skills, and micro decisions that you have to make during the process. But I also have a follow-up question for you, and that was something I found very interesting about your reply, was that you described execution as like a reductive process. You're like, you start out with a lot and you're chopping things away. And I think the reason that's interesting is because I think it's very easy to look at production as like an additive process, right? You start with nothing, you start with an empty Unity project, and you add things to it. You add code, you add assets. But at the same time, if you look at it from like a creative perspective, it's more like chopping things away by adding things. That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is weird. True. I didn't even notice that, but to me, I guess because I get so excited about new ideas. When you have a new idea, it's so exciting. To me, it always feels like a reductive process. It feels like, oh God, it could have been so magnificent. And now it's just this normal game. But at the same time, it's super exciting. I guess those things are both true, aren't they? You're also adding things. Now you have a soundtrack that before there wasn't one, and now you have music in the game. And you're like, sick. It's
right.
got a
By
soundtrack.
the fact that you added a soundtrack, it means that you locked something in, and that means you chopped away a lot of other possibilities that could have been.
Yeah. To me, that feels like execution. That's why they call it execution.
Oh my God. Now we know. You executed the game ideas. Right. So the idea is kind of like a sculptor deciding what to sculpt, and then the execution is like chopping things away till the sculpture comes out, maybe.
Yeah, that feels right.
I think you also often, in typical Grizzly Games manner, I think we have a way to design games in a more reductive manner sometimes, right? A lot of your games are like focused on minimalism. Islanders was very much about taking the city builder genre and removing things from it. Summer House is like a very minimalist toy-like game. Slots and Daggers is also quite minimalist.
Do you feel like that? I've been wondering about that. Like, to me, it doesn't feel as minimalist as the previous games. With Slots and Daggers, I didn't as much have this thing of how can I take an existing genre and chop everything away that feels unnecessary. Like with Slots and Daggers, I was trying to be a bit more, just plentiful, just adding more stuff to it.
I mean, yes and no, because you started with a 6-week prototype. Like the initial scope was like a 6-week game, right?
True.
I think
still, of course, compared to if you set out to make a 2-year roguelike production, it's still super minimalist. Yeah.
Yeah. And you made it completely. I caught you, yeah. You're still a minimalist at heart. I know it. Yeah. I don't really know what the question there was. I guess I was just wondering how you think about minimalism in games and if it's still something you care about.
Yeah. I just minimalism in general. I really like avoiding unnecessary like fluff. I feel like I always really appreciate when I see something that doesn't, because it feels like it's respectful of your time, doesn't it? If someone doesn't put padding into their work, whether it's a book that is short and sweet because they had said everything they had to, or it's like a game. I really enjoy games where, like a game, for example, that I played and really, really loved this year was Arctic Eggs. Have you played that?
Arctic Eggs? No, I've never even heard about that, no.
Oh, it's so great. I can only highly recommend playing it to everyone. It's so great. It's this game where you're in this sort of, I don't want to spoil it for anyone. I'm just going to give like a super minimal pitch. Do you know it?
Now that I have the Steam page open, I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're in this weird sci-fi Arctic world and you have to cook eggs and increasingly complex dishes in a pan for these people who give you these surrealist, weird dialogue bits as a reward for cooking for them. And then slowly, if you've cooked for enough people, you get to the next like part of the world. And it's so great. It's such a good, I loved it so much. It feels so weird and so unique. And the voice of it is just like really, really cool. And the mechanic is also really, really cool it's like a pan flipping mechanic. Where I was going with this is when I played it, I was like, this has zero padding in it. This has just got all of the stuff that it wanted to say, and then it's over. And then I think there is like an endless mode where you can fry additional stuff in the pan and it just gets harder and harder. But I just didn't play that. I only played the core game. It took me, I think, 2 hours or something to complete. And I was like, sick. This is exactly, I think, minimalism in that sense, where it doesn't have to be sleek and, not minimalism in like the Apple sense, where it's a white surface with no detail on it. It can have quite a lot of detail and stuff, but once it's said what it wanted to say, the thing can end and it's fine to, not draw it out into like an artificially lengthy experience. That's what I still really like.
Makes sense. So not necessarily minimalism in terms of production, but minimalism in the sense that it's a focused experience that does what it does well and doesn't have any padding and extra fluff.
Yeah, exactly. Not aesthetic minimalism, but like content minimalism.
Makes sense. So you're the sculptor, and what are like the cuts you cut away first from your game? Or you have this prototype. You said it's like what did the first prototype look like exactly, and where did you take it from there?
So the first prototype was actually surprisingly like close to what the final thing looks like. It had the enemies. It actually had some enemies that landed in the final game. It had the wheels already. It had like a lot of the aspects. It had the little coins flying out on the side. And it had this really, basically because I only had 2 days, I was like, okay, I'm going to make the simplest possible art direction, like the grungiest, sketchiest art direction I've ever made. And so I spent, I think, like 2 hours on my iPad with an Apple Pencil, just drawing on it. And I found this really cool way of sketching because I love making little like pen sketches in my sketchbooks. I've always really enjoyed that. And I've always thought it would be cool to make a game where somehow you retain this like sketchy quality, where it's almost like a gestural little thing, but you can put it straight into the game. But I've never found a way where you don't then have to go and do like loads of actual illustration. And so I found this setting where I think Pixsquare was the app that I used. It's like just a pixel art drawing app on iPad. And the setting is that it just makes all of your lines straight. You're basically not drawing with a brush. You're drawing with like a line tool, but it creates these single pixel lines. And so I started drawing with that tool. And so if you look at the designs in Slots of Daggers,
Slots of Daggers.
Lots of daggers.
Lots of daggers.
Lots of daggers. If you look at the designs in Slots and Daggers, they have this sketchy quality, but all the lines are like straight pixel art lines. And
I see.
So that allowed it to, like drawing an enemy takes literally 2 minutes. You're just sketching like you would in a sketchbook. But for some reason, because these lines create these really pleasing, beautiful pixel art lines that you know from other pixel artwork, it looks finished. So that was the first thing that I discovered. I was like, oh my God, sick. I can make a game where everything is just sketches, basically, sketches that I make on the iPad, but it looks finished. And I love this kind of stuff. Like I'm always, when I'm trying to art direct something, I'm always looking for these self-enforcing styles where there's something about the workflow that sort of enforces coherence in the style. And so here I was like really excited about it because I was like, sick, this is very coherent. It's incredibly fast to produce. And I can also use it for all sorts of aspects of the game. I can use it for the enemies, but I can also use it for UI, for the coins. That was the first thing, finding this style. Then I thought, again, because I really like these art styles that like self-enforce, I thought, what if I light it in Unity? What if it's not a purely 2D project? Because then you get another aspect that just like happens by itself. It's lit by the Unity lighting engine. It's got like some perspective on it. It's casting shadows, all of these things where you don't have to do anything, but it adds extra visual interest. It adds extra coherence and stuff like that.
And it makes it feel more plastic in a way, right?
Yeah, it does. It makes it feel like it's something physically.
It does not look like, I don't know, it's so weird when I look at your screenshots. It doesn't even feel like pixel art game. I'm not like I can see it's pixel art. It doesn't feel like pixel art. It's very weird.
That's what I wanted. I wanted to have this thing where it's like it is technically pixel art, but it doesn't feel like all of the pixel art games that you've played because there's so much pixel art out there. So it being pixel art was almost more like a function of I wanted it to be very fast to make because I knew I wasn't going to have a lot of time with this. And it wasn't oh God, I'm going to have these really beautiful pixel art illustrations. I just realized, oh cool, if I use this line tool, I can enforce a style while being super sketchy.
So execution is maybe also about making like strategically smart decisions, right? If you're like not as experienced in execution, maybe you would have made the mistake of choosing a more expensive style that's more difficult to make and
probably,
ends up looking worse anyways.
yeah, exactly. That's also something that I've really learned over the years is that in so many cases, my first sketch was the best design that I was able to produce. I know they always teach you to like, especially in design school, they're like, never stick with the first sketch, make variations, like interrogate if there isn't a better version of this sketch possible and stuff. But so often I end up with the first sketch being exactly right. So that was the idea with this whole project. I thought, okay, I'm going to, more than on any other project, I'm going to trust this. I'm just going to stick with what I thought in the first second and do that. So also all the enemy designs, they're not like, I just started drawing, and often while I was drawing, I like drew a line and then another line, and then I was like, oh yeah, what if it's an egg? Oh yeah, cool. The egg has a shield, the egg has a sword, and then it's an egg enemy. And then I was like, oh, what if there's like a fantasy race based on eggs? Haven't seen that in a game yet. So now there's like
Eggo.
this, yeah. And if you go into the arena mode, all of the enemies in arena mode are eggs. And they're called yolk folk, which is stupid. So
just the toilet man with laser eyes missing here from the enemies.
Exactly. And then I think another thing that I discovered really early on was I want everything to be animated. I want every tiny little aspect of the game to have a little animation, either like a physics thing, like the coins, where it has a rigid body and it animates itself because of physics, or I don't know, just like a little animation where it flops open or it shakes if you can't use it. All of these little things. I made a rule to myself. Nothing just appears or disappears or triggers its function without having an animation to it.
I think one of the standout factors in the end turned out to be the incredible level of polish that you achieved in a surprisingly small amount of time, right? Still looking at its solo development for like polishing for a couple of months probably only. How did you achieve such a high level of polish in such a short amount of time?
I guess with this one, it didn't feel like a polish phase. It was just like whenever I made something, I made it in final quality. Like really, when you see the video I think I shared it in that tweet, the first prototype, it already has the animations. The coins are shooting out almost like they are shooting out in the final game. It didn't feel like a decoupled process of I put in a new mechanic and then I polish it. This time, again, going back to this idea of I tried to trust my intuition. And if I thought this mechanic is good, I'm just going to put it in. I didn't really prototype stuff. I just put it in final quality, this is really bad advice. If you're making any other game, you really shouldn't do that, I think. But here, I don't know, somehow I just had this confidence of saying, okay, I'm just going to only put stuff in when I feel confident enough that this is going to be a good decision for the game. And then I just always added animations, sound, and like final visuals to it pretty early on. And I guess because everything is so cheap, like the animations, for example, 90% of it is done with DOTween, with this plugin for Unity, where you can just from code, you can tell something without having to write like a coroutine and like an extra thing. You can just in the method where you call it, tell the thing to pop up with like a satisfying little ease animation. So it was cheap, like the visuals, like making an illustration. If I implemented a new mechanic, I could very quickly make an icon for it because all of the things, the rule was always be very, very cheap.
Okay, so you implemented like the whole game first in like this prototype look, but then from then on, everything was final quality, or was the prototype also final quality? Or
no, the prototype didn't have like the full. I added like quite a lot of post-processing and lighting effects and stuff. But I think from the prototype, I got to the final-ish look of the game within 1 or 2 weeks. And then it didn't change much. Then I just added things in that quality.
Okay. Wow. That's super fast for visual development. If you say you developed like the identity of this look in like 2 weeks, that's pretty crazy.
I should go back and see if that actually, but I'm pretty sure that that's true because, yeah, like I said, I didn't do any second guessing with this. I just decided, okay, this is how it's going to look.
Yeah.
It's got this, it looks good in this golden light. That was just the first setting that I found where it looked kind of cool. So I was like, right, it's going to be in golden light. That's I realized that if you crank up the bloom really high, it sort of it makes everything feel kind of soft and it almost looks like fog in some areas and it gives the whole pixel art some more depth. And then I was like, right, okay, the game's going to have overdriven bloom all the way through.
Okay, I see.
And there were so many of these little decisions where I just decided on a gut level, okay, this works, don't touch it again. All the other decisions now have to be based around this fact.
So, right. So if you lock in decisions and like don't second guess them anymore, that obviously makes it quite time efficient, right? You're like, okay, this is locked in, let's move on to the next thing. That's how you have to do it when you have to do it quickly. But then again, I think it's also fair to say the reason why you were able to do it so quickly is because you've been making art for a very long time and you have a very well developed intuition on this kind of stuff. Like if I had to develop a style like this in 2 weeks, it would not look anywhere close to this, I assume.
Yeah, I guess that's why I always try to caveat all of these things with, at this point in our career, I think this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone was making their first game, I would take more time. I would see if I couldn't get like a bit more out of it.
What would you say is like a generally applicable approach to polishing? Is there something like this? If I'm like, here's my prototype, how do I polish this? Would you have any advice for me?
Yeah, I think really doing this animation thing, to me, that adds quite a lot for actually not that much time. Like getting an efficient animation workflow, something like if you're comfortable with programming, get something like DOTween that allows you to add all of these little animations very, very cost efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Then I also realized when I'm looking at animations in a lot of games, I feel like they're too slow. I just realized at some point, like I kept making animation times shorter and shorter. Like the magic number, for me at least, seems to be either 0.2 seconds or 0.3 seconds. Like literally, I would say 95% of the animations in this game have a duration of 0.2 or 0.3 seconds. That just seems to be the correct number for this game. And then I'm using this in DOTween. There's this thing where you can add an ease to the animation. So it doesn't linearly progress from point A to point B, but it goes in like an eased curve. So it does this thing like in Disney movies where it goes like, and then it has an ease that's called back, where it overshoots the target a bit and then comes back to the position. So my hand going over there and then coming back. And that's where it is. And I'm literally going to say for this game, 90% of the animations that you see are either scale in or move in with a 0.3 seconds duration and this ease back thing. And it just makes things look so satisfying, at least to me. I've tried all sorts of other animation timings and settings, but I just realized, okay, that's the one for this game. In back or out back is the ease, and with a 0.3 second thing. So I think that's one tip that I could give. Look at something like DOTween, look at animation easing, and then find the easiest possible implementation so you can give everything an animation. I think sound is a huge component of how polished something feels.
Oh yeah.
And there, what I've learned with this game is how good these, like some of these sound effect packs are. I used to produce way more of the sounds in the games myself. And now for this one, I just downloaded a bunch of these big libraries where you have to combine everything and you have to edit it quite aggressively to make it work for your game specifically. But the source material, I just realized, wow, there's just people out there who have made a pack with like, I don't know, 500 mechanic sounds in it. They've completely recorded every sound that 10 different typewriters can make and put them into a library for you. And that was so helpful because everything in the game also has, pretty much everything makes a sound when it moves. So that was really good. Getting just a big, I think I used, they're called Boom SFX. And they have these packs. I think you guys used them for Thronefall as well, didn't you?
I think Paul told me about the mechanics sound effects and was like very enthusiastic about them as well, yeah.
Maybe it was Paul even who recommended Boom libraries to me. So I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but would recommend. Or finding anything that's like similar to that. And then Screen Shake. I mean, we've
Screen Shake.
talked about it endlessly already in the games, in the indie games world, I feel like. But like dialing your Screen Shake in just right for like, when I look back at the first like 100 prototypes that I made for this game, the first 100 builds, the Screen Shake was insane. Like if you look at the early videos that I tweeted, for some reason, I just put it in my head that the screen needs to shake every time you do something. And it was completely bizarre. Like the camera was moving so much. And then at some point I just spent 2 days reworking all the Screen Shake in the game. and dialing it in just right. And I think that also adds quite a lot if you have like directional screen shake also. So if the coins fly out to the right, the camera shakes to the right a little bit. I think there's like a little bit of storytelling in these screen shakes, even like if an enemy hits you in the face, the camera shakes backwards. And it sort of tells you that something happened that's not good because your head went like,
So it's like screen shake is not screen shake. You want specific screen shake that like fits the specific situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that can really help to make things feel better. This is also something that I learned on this project, or that I tried to use quite a lot, was at some point I realized you can convey so much information with animations and with visuals that you then don't have to convey in a text way. Like, for example, if an item is too expensive to buy, it goes like on the screen. It goes like from left to right. It has like a little animation. And that thing immediately conveys to people, no, you can't, because everyone knows head shaking. And stuff like that. I try to do quite a lot of things where the sound combined with the animation, combined with how things light up in the game, gives you quite a lot of info on what's happening intuitively.
I think what's interesting and why your game looks so polished is also because, not just because of those, like what you just described is like useful polished, right? You polish that kind of provides information, but there's also a lot of less polish in your game that has no other reason than to look nice. For example, what looks very impressive are these like leaves that are like hanging into the screen in the foreground that like cast a nice silhouette. And also, I think one of the best assets probably in your game is this glass next to the slot machine.
Thanks. Oh, I love the glass.
Yeah.
It's the glass that I have standing on my desk when I'm working. I just modeled that because I had it there for reference. Because all of the things in the game are so simple to make. This is also something that we used to say quite a lot in Grizzly Games days about if you make stuff really simple, you can be generous with it because you have time. Because putting like a glass in, or putting these like the sprites for these leaves that are hanging into the screen that you just described, they are so ugly. You wouldn't believe, honestly. They literally per leaf took less than a minute to draw because they're just incredibly, incredibly ugly. But then because the post-processing does something nice with them and they're slightly blurred, you don't really realize. And they also still have this pixel art aesthetic on it. So yeah, I feel like there were so many things in this game that forced everything to look correct. I could be so gestural and fast with things. And then it allows me to, be quite generous in, okay, there's a glass. And then again, with the glass, I was like, what if the screen shake also affects the glass? What if I make the glass shake every time the screen shakes? And because I had the DOTween thing set up, it was super easy. It cost me like 30 minutes to make a little function that makes the glass shake with the screen shake.
Right. Crazy. And do you have like custom shaders for how the leaves move? Or is that like, yeah, you do. Okay.
Yeah. To be fair, this is also something that's probably important to mention with this game. Not everything that is in Slots and Daggers was made from scratch for Slots and Daggers, because I was coming from this farm game that I was working on. And I had made a bunch of like things that translated surprisingly well. For example, the whole screen shake system, or this system about foliage wiggling, which is really funny because the farm game is like all about foliage and about like wiggling grass and stuff. And then this incredibly complex system, which is way overcomplicated, just ended up in Slots and Daggers to wiggle these leaves in the foreground.
Right.
And then I had to actually go in and remove tons of features from it because it was eating into performance later on.
Okay, you had like an over-engineered system for like the leaves in the
massively.
foreground.
Yeah. You could have had I could have initially, I was even thinking about leaving that in. You could have wiggled the leaves with your mouse, which you really don't need that because I had to like render custom textures and stuff. So yeah.
And for the liquid in the glass, I think it also moves a bit. How did you actually do that?
It's just a mesh. It's a separate mesh in the glass. It's a combination. The glass is like the weirdest combination of things. It's the glass has a mesh, and then there's a surface mesh in there that is like the top surface of the liquid. And I'm just animating that. Exactly. Yeah. And then I'm trying to think, I also did something where I wanted to make it look like it's, you know, how like light gets reflected weirdly through water.
Right.
So I put like a gradient into the like a glowing gradient into the shadow
I
that
see
was
it.
cast by the glass. So then it looks like, ooh, it's like this realistically rendered, but it's just really, really stupid. And because the camera can't really move in the game, you don't notice it.
That's such a good detail. Wow.
There's so much of this stuff where, yeah, you can just be, it's quite forgiving because the camera can't really rotate. Same with the cigarette, for example, that's burning in the top. The ashtray that it's in is a 3D model because I realized, oh shit, the ashtray, you will see if it doesn't cast shadows, but then the cigarette is just a 2D sprite because that doesn't really have to give lighting information.
You were aiming for a very specific vibe or aesthetic, right? The assets you put around the slot machine are not random.
No. I wanted it to be, that was this mix of this graphic novel that I was saying earlier about like it's a fantasy world and there's a dagger, there's like a ritual dagger with these like ornaments on it and it looks like a classic elven fantasy dagger or something from Dungeons and Dragons. But there's also poker chips and a cigarette and a glass that probably has Negroni in it or some cocktail. And what I wanted to do is evoke that same feeling that this graphic novel gave me through just putting a combination of a bunch of things that aren't often combined. I wanted to evoke this feeling of, oh, there's this world beyond the table where this dagger exists and these cigarettes exist in the same world. And there's like adventurers going on and there's some sort of Dungeons and Dragons type fantasy world, but there's also modern elements to it. So I tried to, with every element that's on the table, I tried to add like a little bit of like an implied reality beyond this game.
And I think there's also some sound design, like you can hear people talking in the background and stuff like that,
Yeah,
right?
true.
So the vibe is very much that you sit like in the back of a bar or something and like play this weird fantasy game.
I realized at some point that if you put cheering people when something successful happens in the game, it's so much more fun. Like if you hit a good combo, there's like people in the background. I downloaded some like hooligan chants. And they're going like, yeah, when you hit a critical hit and stuff like that. Or like your player character, when you lose the game, it goes like, oh, because it's frustrating to lose. And I thought that would be a fun way to make the game like a bit more exciting.
That's also such a nice detail, you're right, because that changes the fantasy from you're like a depressed little guy in the back of the bar playing on your own to there are actually like people looking over your shoulders and paying attention, right?
Yeah. That's what I was imagining. I was like, this is not, there's like a crowd has formed around you and they're cheering you on. They're like, come on, you can do it. And then when you hit like a really big critical strike, everyone's like, yeah,
Jonas is back at the slot machine. Oh my God, let's see
what he does. He's losing all his money.
There are some really cool effects that look really impressive in motion, like the attack effects, like the lightning strikes and so on. Is it all just smokes and mirrors, or is something fancy going on there?
There's quite a lot of like just simple custom shaders. That's something that I've found super effective is I'm not great at making shaders, but I can quickly string together something, especially with shader graph. I know enough that I can make like simple effects. So that was really helpful to just be able to, for loads of effects, make a quick custom shader that allowed me to do something. So for example, for this, like the attack animation, the little sword goes and it hits your health bar. And then that sword animates out in quite a satisfying way, I think, where like it gets pixelated out basically. So that's just a custom shader where it looks at it like moves a threshold across a gradient and then the pixels disappear.
Okay, I see. Are there objects where you like change the material halfway through to have like a specific effect? Or like you wanna now make the dagger disappear, so now you use the disappear shader, or
I think for most of them they're already in this one. It's probably not very efficient, but
who cares?
most of them just have the dagger shader.
Okay.
That will then be on it all the time, or the cigarette shader that's just always there. So I'm not switching out a lot. One thing that I spend quite a lot of time on, but I did that for the farm game already, so this didn't really count into Slots and Daggers development time. I wrote this one shader, and by a lot of time, I mean like half a day or a day or something. I wrote this one shader that can pixelate particles in quite a nice way. So, and then I use that everywhere in the game because it just means you can have these smoke or fire or like impact effects that look like someone's hand drawn a pixel animation. And that was really nice to be able to have, like the cigarette smoke, for example, or when you hit the enemies, there's like a little explosion. It was really nice to not have to actually hand animate pixel effects because those take so long. If you have to go in and like frame by frame, I'm also not really good at that. I'm not an animator. So that was a really helpful little shader graph. I'd be happy to share that online if people are interested. Yeah, that was a good trick to just have a little particle effect that can be pixelated.
Can you maybe give some quick advice about colors? Because I feel like this is something you're very good at. Like the color scheme in Slots and Daggers is once again very, very satisfying. And I'm not sure what about it is, but there's like the screenshots even have like slightly different color schemes. Like there's like a warmer scheme, there's like a colder scheme. I think for different regions you have slightly different colors also, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's like if you go to the swamp, it's like a green color scheme. If you go to the citadel, it has like a burny red color scheme type of thing. Tips with colors, it's a little bit like with creativity tips. The longer I do it, the harder I find it to give advice because it just becomes more and more intuitive and gut level. I think that like for me, how I approach color is I try to add enough variety that it looks interesting. I usually start making things too saturated. So things have quite saturated, bright local colors because I think it's easier to tone that down using post-processing than to add variety because you can't really add information. If everything's gray and you add saturation, then it's all going to have the same color. Whereas if everything's super colorful and it clashes, you can just tone down the saturation to the point where, okay, now the colors are close enough to each other, but they still have quite a lot of variety because this thing used to be yellow and this thing used to be green and this thing used to be blue. So when you desaturate all of them and maybe give them like a reddish tint, they're all harmonious, but they still have quite a lot of variety. So this is how I try to approach color schemes, is try to think, how can you create unity? Like not Unity, the engine, Unity in like a unified visual image. And I use post-processing for that quite a lot.
Interesting. Like for example, so it's like your approach is like fix it in post. So you make like everything has like everything just has the color it has. It's like cool. The slot machine button background is green, the button is red. And then you have just a very good post-processing shader on top that makes everything look right.
If you look at this game without post-processing, it's incredibly ugly. And it also looks very, very different without the post-processing. It has completely different colors. So this is again one of those things where the color scheme, I like to have a color scheme self-enforce itself because you can basically put, like a lot of colors aren't even possible with this post-processing applied because the blues, the greens, the reds, the purples are all super desaturated. So even if you throw like a purple thing into there, it's going to fit into the color scheme because the post-processing pulls the purples down in saturation so much that it ends up making sense. So I really enjoy, that's how I usually design color schemes in Unity. I design them in this, Unity has this post-processing stack where you can add a bunch of effects. And I mostly design in there, which is bad, which I'm trying to get away from, to be honest, because it means the longer a project goes on, the harder it becomes to make changes. You're sort of backing yourself into a corner. For Slots and Daggers, it worked. But for other games, I don't know if I would recommend it to everyone to always work like that.
I think it sounds for some projects, this sounds very smart. I'm not opposed to it whatsoever. And that also means you get a lot of easy variety just by changing how the post-processing, right? That means like the warm color scheme and like the colder color scheme, that's also just post-processing.
Exactly. That's the really nice thing about it. You can then create like these drastic shifts in mood with post-processing. And I think what it does, what people have feedback to me about Slots and Daggers is that it looks like very unified.
Mhm.
It looks like it's all made from one wash, basically, or painted with one brush. And I think post-processing really helps with that, where if you turn it off, the things look way less like they're on the same table or they come from the same world. But because post-processing is applied like on the whole image, it's not something that applies to individual props. The borders and intersections between these props disappear a little bit into the background. That's why Bloom, for example, is so great. Because I think in games, what you often have is you see in an ugly way, you see the interactions between different 3D models. And I'm always looking for ways to hide them. You know, like in 3D games, for example, when something sticks out of the ground, that point where the ground and the model intersect, it always looks a bit ugly because that's not how the real world works. Normally there would be like dirt and like a rock and grass is growing in these crevices. And I think post-processing is really great for that because the bloom creates like a soft little blur across objects and then it masks these intersections. So I think what I would do if it's a bigger project, I would try and design the color scheme first without post-processing so that you don't have to use post-processing that much. So try to make it look nice, applying the same rules, like trying to create unity in the image, but just doing it with local colors already, doing it with the light colors already and getting like closer to the final image without applying aggressive post-processing, because then you can you're still applying post-processing to tie everything together, but it's more like a 5 to 10% shift from where you were. It's not like an 80%. It doesn't look completely different because that's the bit that makes it difficult in the end. Like in Slots and Daggers, if you put anything in that's remotely yellow, it's going to glow like crazy because the bloom picks up on it.
Right.
And so you can't, or red, because I turned down the reds very aggressively. It's actually quite difficult to make things red in Slots and Daggers. So I have to know when there's a red element because I want to signal to you this, you can't buy this, for example. It has to have an incredibly specific color so as to not get pushed into the yellows by the post-processing. Stuff like that. That just gets annoying. So I would, on a longer project, I would try to avoid going so hard.
I see. Similar approach, but keep it a bit closer to the final colors, maybe. I see.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I guess there's one more stage that I'd be interesting to know your opinion about, and that would be like the marketing stage of our project. What are your current thoughts on marketing indie games?
Marketing indie games, the big question. How do we market?
The big question everybody's wondering about. My game did not sell. What did I mess up about my marketing?
Happened? Is it the Indie-Pocalypse?
It is the marketing, isn't it?
So I agree with what I think most people are believing at the moment, that it has a lot to do with the initial appeal of the game. Like it's just very difficult to market an unappealing game. If you throw loads of money into that, I think it still won't work because there are too many appealing games out there. And essentially marketing is just trying to get people to pay attention to one thing, isn't it? So if there's tons of things that they could be paying attention to, and those things are more appealing, then no amount of money you could spend will make them pay attention to your thing. So I think the biggest thing for marketing is your initial premise. Is the game idea interesting? Is the world of the game interesting to people? Is the way you visually present it, is that interesting? I think that is a huge part of marketing, is can you make something that when people see it for the first time, it will intrigue them, it will pull them in, it will make them stop scrolling. This is actually, I think, something that where Slots and Daggers that's probably one of the weaknesses of the project compared to other things that I've made, I'd say.
You
like
think so?
Summer House, for example, I think Summer House has a higher rate of drawing people in. I don't think it's a better game per se, but I think because the screenshots look like illustrations of houses, people often just stop for them and have a quick look. What's going on here? Oh, this is a nice, cute house. Whereas with Slots and Daggers, because it's quite a static, quite flat surface, you're looking at a table surface with like this weird, quite small enemy, and then it's quite interfacey. Like you don't see a lot of world. You see quite a lot of like buttons and user interface stuff. So I think it already excludes quite a lot of people who are not into interfacey games. So this is something that I would like think about more specifically if I wasn't planning to make a 6-week project. With this one, it just happened. But if it was a bigger project, I think I'd be thinking a bit more about the screenshots that that's going to produce. How are people going to see them when they scroll past it?
So when you think about marketing, your thoughts do very much start with product.
Yeah.
And not with promotion. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And then promotion-wise, for me, it's just been great to work with future friends. They're just really, really good at what they do. Like, they know who to reach out to. They do it in quite a targeted way, I think. What they're also really good at is Slots and Daggers, for example. Our announcement strategy was, because we didn't get into any bigger showcases with it, which I think a lot of developers right now, that's like the done thing. If you have a game that's appealing enough, you try to get into one of those larger video showcases that draw attention to your game. Yeah. And the bigger your production is, the more potential your game has, like the bigger the showcase you can get into. And Slots and Daggers didn't get into, I think, anything. I don't know how many we applied to. I don't think we had amazing timing because it was such a short production cycle and it was during summer. All of the big showcases usually happen in summer. So those deadlines had all passed. We couldn't really submit to them. I don't know if they would have accepted Slots and Daggers either. So we aimed for a slightly more targeted, smaller showcase, which was it was called Games Forged in Germany. And it was this great Steam event that was mostly targeted, I think, at the German market, but also visible all over Steam. And it was this really great promotion of games that are made in Germany by like a German team. And what they got was they had, I think for a limited amount of time, they had Steam featuring somewhere, maybe on the front page even. And that was really great because what you're trying to do basically with all of these video showcases is you're trying to somehow convert people from being on YouTube to going on Steam and wishlisting your game. And because this was a Steam internal event, that already happened. Like the people are already on Steam. So conversion is way, way better. So I think that really worked for us. It was really nice. We got quite a lot of wish lists on the first weekend out of that because it was a smaller event to begin with, but it had way better conversion to wish lists. And it was a great event. Like they did a really good job hosting that. It was a really nice, they cut a video showcase for it too. That gave us like some starting velocity. That was all future friends who figured that out and who had connected us to this showcase. And then we made a demo, which I think is just great still. It's way more competitive than it used to be. I think like 2 years ago, if you had a good demo in a Steam Next Fest, that gave you hundreds of thousands of wish lists. Now it's just so competitive. There are so many games in the Next Fest.
It's crazy how quickly the market circumstances change with some of these things, right?
It is.
If you're like, it was different 2 years ago. Wild.
Yeah. Whatever works, like people are going to massively do that in a year. I don't know what's the new thing. That's what I'm constantly trying to figure out. Like, what is because it seems like Steam Next Fest is something you still do.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's not the smart thing to do. It's just the normal thing that you have to do. What do you think? Can we share some secrets? Do you see something? Do you have a theory of what might become big?
I think that it's kind of a good thing that the market has this equalizing force in a way, right? Because if there are any new hacks, if there are like new strategies, if there are new tactics that people find, then developers get to exploit them for a very, very short amount of time till either they're patched out, like either Steam fixes them so they're no longer exploitable, or everybody starts doing them and then they just become normalized. So I think it's probably just not the correct way to think about exploitable tactics. I think it's probably just the correct way to think about playing a fair game against the other games and out competing them. Even though I think most game developers don't like looking at it in this way. And I think also, it's not like a zero-sum game. I think if there are more good games, then there'll be more people playing these games. I think that's also the case.
That's quite a wholesome way of looking at it. But it's boring. Come on, Jonas. There have to be hacks. We have to look. We have to find the hack that's going to make us millionaires. No, but I agree. I think that the big takeaway for me after years of making games is you can't really cheat your way you can do things right, you can make a good demo, but like the things you do right are also the things that are, there's no big secret to it. You have to obviously make a good trailer. If you make a trailer that shows your indie game's company logo for 10 seconds in the beginning and then starts with a slow pan over the ground and then reveals a character, and like 30 seconds in you still don't know what the game's like, that's bad, clearly. Same with making a demo, positioning it in Next Fests. You obviously want to try and get as much attention with your announcement, like use your marketing bullets that you have, like the announcement, the date reveal, the demo launch, make little events out of those. But I actually agree with you. I don't think there's these big hacks.
I think it's a bit daunting for new developers to get started with like marketing, because it's like, how the hell do I do a press release? How the hell do I reach out to content creators, right? But it's like not, once you've done it once or twice, it's like not super black magic anymore. It's just like, do the standard things and make a good game. Which is whatever that means.
Exactly. I was just going to say, which is make a good trailer, do the standard stuff is not super helpful, I guess, when you're starting out. But yeah, there's so many good resources on this stuff. Like how to make a good trailer has been discussed at length. And I think that's stuff that you can figure out. And really, I think it just makes sense to focus a lot of attention on the game. And maybe, when you're starting out, maybe also this feeds back into the make small games. Don't make one thing for 3 years. Because then if you make mistakes the first time around, you've just like missed your whole shot. Whereas if you make something that was like 4 months, and then you publish it and you make a trailer and you do a press release and do all of that, you can learn from those mistakes. I feel like with the early stuff that we put out in university, we got to learn a bunch of these things a couple of times. You know, we did like a press release for our second semester when Paul and I made ROM with Rainer, which was like our little experimental game. And what was it called? The Shadow game?
Obscure.
That was so cool. That was such a cool game. And like we did press releases for that, didn't we? I think you even won a little competition with it. And there you learn all of these things so that you then, when you have an actually good game on your hand, you don't fuck it up.
Right. And you don't have to do it for the first time on your 5-year project. You do it for the first time on your 3-month project.
Yeah. Or if you're a genius, if you have the amazing 5-year project idea, then I think it's a good idea to look into getting a publisher. If the game's actually good, you're also going to find a publisher because they're all out there. They're all looking for stuff. People are asking me quite a lot, how do you pitch to a publisher? How do I reach out to future friends? I think the truth is they're obviously getting a lot of pitches right now, but they're also looking for good games. It's not like they're trying not to sign stuff. They're obviously trying to sign the next cool thing. So whether you find a publisher it's a little bit like the marketing question. Did you manage to make a game that attracts enough attention that a publisher will sign it? So I think focusing on the game is a good way to go usually.
Yeah, it solves a lot of problems, and it can. So what you're saying is it can even solve the marketing problem if you just don't want to deal with it at all. If you really just focus on making a quote unquote good game, then in the worst case, you'll be able to get a publisher and have somewhat decent marketing like that.
Yeah. Or great marketing, because they're usually really good at what they're doing. Yeah.
Sure. But I mean, there are different kinds of publishers. It's very hard to differentiate sometimes. Also,
hard to generalize. Yeah.
Hard to generalize. And I feel like I might be wrong about this, but my gut feeling about a lot of publishers is also that once they signed you, they oftentimes don't have as much of an incentive to actually do something useful anymore. It's just like you already signed away a percentage of your revenue. They can just focus on signing the next thing and don't really need to try too hard to make anything happen, right? Unless
I don't know. Do you feel like that's how it works?
I feel like a lot of publishers operate exactly like that.
Interesting. Because to me, I always think that can't work in the long run, right? Because they won't make revenue if the game doesn't do well.
Yeah.
So it must be in their interest to like elevate the profiles of these games. I don't know. Maybe I'm I'm obviously speaking from...
You've got very lucky with Future Friends because they're very good.
I've had a great experience with Raw Fury. I've had a great experience with Future Friends. So I guess that's quite a lucky position to speak from.
I would say you've been in the lucky position that you've worked with only like top tier publishers so far. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I to be fair, I haven't worked with that many publishers either. I'm just sometimes like getting emails and hearing stories from other developers and hearing what they tell behind the scenes and so on. It's not always glorious. So
true. I also know these stories from other developers that I'm speaking to. Yeah, definitely right on that.
But it's like everything. It's like hard to generalize. Yeah. Do you have any other feelings about where the indie game space is moving overall? Like, what are the whispers in your bubble, or what are people thinking about the problems? Is the Indie-Pocalypse still a topic, or
I think the Indie-Pocalypse is always going to be a topic because, first of all, it is probably happening a little bit all the time. Like, it is getting squeezed, isn't it? That's how it feels like to me when I speak to friends, when I see like how games launched. It feels like the whole space is getting squeezed a bit, where the people who make loads of money and who are fortunate enough to be part of like the top, 10% or something, they tend to make more money because there is still a growing audience, and we're only slowly, like, indie games are breaking more and more into the mainstream. So there is quite a lot of money being made, but I feel like it's concentrating quite hard at the top of the curve. And the people who are not in the top 10%, it looks like are making less and less money. I don't think it's like a huge fall off, but I think just year by year, it's less and less what the game under the median makes.
I see.
That's my suspicion. So I think there's part of the Indie-Pocalypse that's just justified, where people are just having a hard time because it's a difficult economic scene to be in. It's also just the creative like scene in general. I think it's a competitive, very, very difficult way of making a life. So I think people are always going to be right to say, wow, this is fucking scary and really, really difficult to make a living like this. And then I think there's also always, people are going to make mistakes, and then it's going to feel like the Indie-Pocalypse is hitting, but maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe something just didn't pan out. So I think there's like a mix of different reasons for why the Indie-Pocalypse is always going to be around. And sometimes the Indie-Pocalypse genuinely hits you. Sometimes you just made a smart decision, and then something that was completely out of your control went wrong. A genre just completely tanked. You didn't have any control over that. You didn't have any way of foreseeing that, and your game doesn't sell anything, or whatever other circumstances. So yeah, I think Indie-Pocalypse is here to stay.
I see.
Other things about what do you think? Because what we're seeing so hard at the moment is this, like, we're seeing these very dopamine heavy games, I think, recently. It's becoming more and more of people have really figured out how to make good game loops. People have also really figured out how to polish a game, how to finish a game nicely. And Slots and Daggers sits very much in that trend of games that, I think Thronefall is a similar example, or like all of these like bigger games recently, Ball Pit, Balatro, all these big things. They're really satisfying on like a dopamine level, aren't they?
And the interesting thing is also that in a way, indie games are the ones who are farming this like these dopamine heavy games. And for some reasons, bigger game studios haven't fully caught up to that. I wonder if at some point they will, and if they will start making games like this, because on paper, it seems like such a corporate thing to do, to just be so formulaic and be like, okay, we have like a psychological analysis. We know which things make people addicted. Let's do all of those things. Let's put it on Steam, easy peasy. Let's repeat that. But for some reason, in this case, it's not the big studios who are doing that. It's the indies who are doing that. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that's true. I guess I wonder, are they not already, maybe they're already doing it. Maybe we're just slowly catching up with them. Maybe Call of Duty is just an amazing dopamine farm. And we've just now finally found a way to make a similarly satisfying thing, but without spending 250 million on it.
Oh, I
and
see.
that's by
Maybe
using
it's the
the
other way
roulette
around.
table. Yeah. I don't know. Basically, what I'm wondering about is this curve of games are becoming more and more reliant on like neuron activation or whatever you want to call it, and like
Yeah, I see
tight,
that.
rewarding game loops. Is this a curve that's going to just continue to escalate? Are we just going to see more and more of that? Or is it like a zigzag movement? Because the indie games, when we started out making games, there was quite a lot of like walking simulators, very atmospheric stuff, like storytelling experiments, or when it was based around a very tight core loop or like a mechanic, it was often still very quiet and meditative, stuff like Monument Valley. I wonder if that's going to come back in fashion a bit, or if that's just over because the other stuff is more satisfying to play. What's your take on that?
You know, have you heard of like the attention economy, where it's like everything is basically competing for your attention, right? So games are not just competing with other games. Games are also competing with like YouTube and Netflix and TikTok and so on. And I feel like the attention economy is just constantly becoming more optimized and becoming more competitive. And what I'm wondering, like this is a theory, I'm not sure if this is true, but what I'm wondering is if basically in order to stay in this competitive in this attention economy, we basically need these immediately engaging hyper dopamine game loops now to compete with stuff like TikTok and so on. So you can't have like a walking simulator that's gonna have a very satisfying payoff after an hour or so, because people are not gonna, they don't have the attention spans and the patience to stick around to it. Because you could also just play something like Vampire Survivors or Megabonk and like get to the dopamine immediately. Like you don't have to wait for the dopamine kick like for an hour to kick in. Like,
yeah, fair. Maybe that's how it works. But then at the same time, I also think because it's an attention economy and a lot of it is based on, are you able to initially draw attention to your project? And one thing that creates attention is being different and doing something that isn't being done by everyone. So I think there's going to come a time where if this saturates enough, if enough people make Vampire Survivors, slot machine games, whatever type of dopamine focused things, it's going to start paying off to make something radically different and maybe something very, very quiet or contemplative again. So there could be a way to, in an attentional capacity, really benefit from making something that's not super dopamine based. Maybe there's going to be a time where it creates way more attention to make a walking simulator. I don't think that time is here yet, but maybe there's going to be like a counter movement.
If you look at history, then typically there are counter movements to everything. So if it's like, I think it's a fair assumption to assume that there's going to be a counter movement at some point. If it's like complete overstimulation for half a decade, then it's probably going to be followed by people craving for calmer, slower experiences. I can totally see that. But I don't think the attention economy has peaked. I think it's gonna.
Do you think it's gonna get a bit crazier?
I think it's gonna get way crazier before people are really gonna crave slower experiences again.
Yeah.
But to be fair, even nowadays, there's still totally a niche for slower and story-based games. So it's not like you can't do them anymore, right? Just so
100%.
People get the context of that, right? You can totally succeed with a walking sim nowadays. Still, I feel like
100%. Yeah. I'm wondering what I'm going to make next. Whether I'm going to go back to the farm game. That is still like a possibility, but also I feel like I've got a craving to make something that's quieter after Slots and Daggers, because Slots and Daggers was I really enjoyed challenging myself to make something that's not this like ambient, atmospheric-y thing that Summer House was. But now I can feel myself being pushed in the other direction again, where I've made something that felt like fast and hectic at times, and it's about fighting, and it's got lots of flashing lights and stuff. So yeah, maybe for me personally, I'm gonna take a turn in a different direction, but I don't know.
Yeah. Making a specific type of project almost makes you want to do the exact opposite next, right? So,
Yeah.
like just to
100%.
feel something different.
To feel something, just to feel something.
Just to feel something.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just, or you just add gambling and dopamine stuff to your farming game.
That's the other, yeah. To be fair, the farming game is quite dopamine heavy already. So,
okay. I mean, it works. It works, though. Totally works. I feel like if your game is very good at giving dopamine and it has a good fantasy, it's probably gonna do okay. I feel very confident in making like that abstraction.
Hey, should we do a thing? Because we obviously both used to be part of Grizzly Games, and we used to, after I stopped working with Grizzly Games, we had like weekly calls for a long time because we just wanted to stay in touch. We didn't live in the same place, so we didn't see each other, and we weren't working on the same project, but we were still once a week doing a Grizzly Games call to just chat. And we used to recommend games to each other a lot during these calls. Should we do a mini episode of, it's a shame that Paul isn't here, but you recommend one game to me, I recommend one game to you that you've recently played.
Oh,
and if it sucks, you can cut it out later.
No worries. You were the one who initially recommended Outer Wilds to me, and I love the game. Like my favorite game of all time. I have it as a desktop background, so I'm always keen to hear your game recommendations. Do you frequently take time out of your day to try like a new game? Is that something that's like actively implemented in your routine?
Yeah, it's not super like routine based, but I'm trying to do it regularly.
Okay.
Buying a Steam Deck has really helped me because I just hate in the evening sitting on my computer because I spend so much time on the computer already, so I can't really be asked playing anything. That makes me sit down on the computer, but with the Steam Deck, it's really good.
Okay, then I guess go ahead with your recommendation. I think I have to check out my Steam library to see what I've played recently.
You have a look at the library. I've got a good one. I've already recommended Arctic Eggs earlier, but another game that I played last week, and this has been out for ages, and I've always had it on my want to play list, and only now got around to playing it. It's called Rainy Season, and it's really, really great. I can't remember the name of the developer. Inasa Fujio. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I think they're based in Japan. And it's this gorgeous little walking simulator. No, it's not. Walking simulator is wrong. It's like a little exploration game where you just spend a day at your grandma's house with your mom and your brother, and I think your aunt is also there. And you're a child in your grandma's house. There's not really anything to do. It's raining outside. So I think initially the plan I don't want to spoil too much. Initially there was a plan for the day, and you're not doing this. You're just staying at the house and you're just going around having a look at things, interacting with small objects. And then there are these slightly surreal daydreams that you discover. And that's it. There's like some really cute dialogue, and it's just great. It is so nicely done. First of all, it's gorgeous visually, and it also sounds really, really good. Like it's got great sound design. It's got really, really beautiful music. But the sort of softness of how it plays and the everyday nature of the things that you interact with, I sometimes miss that in games. That there isn't more stuff that's about our actual everyday surroundings and about more mundane feelings. Like games are often very high stakes, which is good, which is exciting, but I really enjoyed playing this as an alternative to that.
A case study to the exact opposite of dopamine farming games.
Yeah. It perfectly fits into what we were talking about earlier. So Rainy Season is
awesome. I will make sure to check that one out. It looks quite interesting. Yeah, I thought of a game that I think I want to recommend to you. It's actually a game from last week's podcast guest, which I'm not sure you've played. The game's called Eastshade. Have you heard of that one?
No, I don't think so.
You can open it on Steam if you want, or I'll send you a link.
Wow.
And
it looks amazing.
If I had to describe it in one sentence, it's the closest thing to Outer Wilds that I've played so far.
Really? Oh, you've really got my attention now.
And it's it's completely different vibe. So it's not really a puzzle game or anything of the sorts. But what it is an exploration game. It's an exploration game about being a painter. Yeah.
Wow. Has this been out for a while?
This came out in 2019. Yeah.
Because now that you said you're a painter, I remember seeing this like ages ago and then completely forgetting about it again.
Yeah.
Really cool. I'll definitely play that. Thank you. That's
You're welcome.
Great recommendation.
You're welcome. Like it's I'm not entirely sure how to describe it. Like the developer actually described it as a role-playing game. They said it's like Skyrim, but without combat. So if Skyrim had like the combat replaced with a different mechanic, and they basically replaced the combat with painting.
Right. So I'm super interested in playing that. I hope it's going to play on Steam Deck, but I would even sit down on the computer to play that, because this question of can you do exploration of like an open world or like a semi-open world without motivating the player through combat, that is such an interesting game design problem, I think. And if people solve that in an elegant way, I'm always so up for it. Those are some of the best games, I think.
Awesome. Yeah. Was really fun catching up with you. We should definitely repeat this sometime.
We should.